I want to bring in our studio guests again. Let me remind you of who they are. Dr. Bob Wekesa is with Wits University's African Center for the Study of the U.S. Professor Gilbert Khadiagala is also with ACSUS. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time this morning here on the special edition of, shall I call it the AM Report, Spoo? The special edition as we hone in on the first of 3 debates between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I think, Dr. Wekesa, let's actually begin at the very beginning of the debate. So the first issue was Chris Wallace, the moderator. His opening question was around Amy Coney Barrett, set to succeed Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Trump's response to that, Dr. Wekesa, was that we won the election. We have the Senate, we have the White House, and we have an excellent candidate. It's not illegal for them to go ahead with this appointment.
Right, and I think it was, constitutionally, legally, police-wise right. You can't really argue with the fact that he is in power, the Republicans have a majority in the Senate, and they are at liberty to make a choice and make it quickly and so forth. However, I think Biden's rebuttal was equally important because he argued from the moral end of things. The late Ruth Ginsburg has not even been interred. And I think the speed with which it is being done raises suspicions. And obviously then he argued that, it's only a couple of weeks to elections. So on the moral ground, rather than legalistic point of view, we can always wait. We shouldn't be, rushing.
Yeah.
But even more cleverly, he then introduced the idea of Obamacare going before this same Supreme Court, and therefore becoming a contentious issue there. And of course, the Obamacare being a major issue to do with health and, with potential, lives being lost and so forth. So I think you can see that at that point, discussion on the nominations for the Supreme Court disappeared almost only after about 2-3 minutes. And we went into discussions around healthcare, Obamacare for that matter.
Yeah, Prof. Khadiagala, I mean, an equally important discussion around healthcare as well. Biden making the point that the reason why there is this push to get Amy Coney Barrett through is around, among other things, Obamacare, the repealing of Roe versus Wade, which would once again make abortion illegal in the U.S., the Affordable Care Act, essentially saying it would mean being a woman in the United States of America would become a pre-existing condition that is not covered.
See, the Supreme Court debate is also very clearly linked to a previous precedent where the Republicans forced President Obama to withdraw his candidate for the Supreme Court in the final year, because they were making the point that it's very premature. It's late for a president to make a decision as decisive as a Supreme Court judge in the final year of their presidency. So what the Democrats are saying, why don't you stick to the same principle like the previous time? You're the ones who said Obama cannot do it in the final year. And this is a time when it's very, very late in the game. Why are you appointing her to the Supreme Court? But I think you are correct, Michelle. The bigger issues are around, Roe v. Wade on abortion, Obamacare, but also just shifting the Supreme Court very much to the right. And she's fairly young. She's only 48. And these judges serve for their lifetimes. So she's going to have a significant impact on the court itself. So the fear is that this is the final moment for Trump really to change the really rubric of the U.S. Supreme Court. And that is why the Democrats are contesting it, in addition to contesting it because it's very late in the day for Trump.
Now, Prof, let me bring it closer to the African continent. I mean, the obvious thing, the obvious question there would be that we expect judges to be beyond reproach. And Trump makes the argument that he has the electoral mandate to appoint a judge. And I know that in this continent and in this country, issues about judges and their integrity and also integrity of elections also come into question. Why should it matter as to what judge is appointed into that role of the Supreme Court?
It matters because even though the court is supposed to be a political institution, is heavily politicized in the United States. So most of the decisions that have to be contested, if they have to be finalized, the Supreme Court actually makes the final decisions. And the point also is that you look at the judges' history, legal history, how have they been voting on some of these issues? So the issue with Amy Barrett is that she's been known to vote very conservative on most of the issues that Democrats think are very, very, very contentious within the U.S. political space. So the Supreme Court is actually more important than we think it is. Because if, for instance, the decision about the election has to go to the Supreme Court and is a tie, the issue around who is actually going to vote for whoever is going to come up. So I think the fear is that if she gets to the court at this moment, and she appears to be leaning more towards the Republicans, if the decision has to go to the court, there is no guarantee that she will actually provide a fair judgment. She probably would provide a judgment that is favorable to Mr. Trump. That is the fear.
Well, let's bring the discussion now to the U.S. In fact, we're joined by Dr. Keith Jennings, who is president of African American Center on Global Politics, and he joins us, I believe, Dr. Jennings, you're in Atlanta, Georgia with us this morning. Thank you so much for your time here on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405 in South Africa. And we're beginning here with our analysis in studio, focusing on that first question posed by moderator Chris Wallace around the issue of Amy Coney Barrett's appointment to the Supreme Court. Did you think that voters have any more clarity on where both candidates stand on this particular issue?
I think they do, because many had a position prior to the debate beginning. The reason that the Trump administration is fast-tracking the nomination and the appointment is because he wants her to be part of the decision-making body in case any of the presidential election has to be adjudicated. They do not trust the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and that's why they continue to say it's 4-4. And a 4-4 decision would revert back to a lower court. In Bush v. Gore, the final count was 5-4, and all of the Republican-appointed judges voted for Bush. All of the Democratic-appointed judges voted for Gore. And in this case, because of the lack of trust in the Supreme Court Chief Justice who voted for Obamacare, Trump has a different position than the Senate does, the Republican senators. The Republican senators know that he could still make what's called a recess appointment. That's after the election, but before the next president gets in. Unfortunately, they have shown that the hypocrites that they are. And by forcing Obama 10 months out from the election, not to appoint his judge, Marlon Garden, and then now to reverse that and say that he has an electoral mandate. No, what he has is an opportunity to put a right-wing judge on the bench who will lead the charge in getting rid of all of the progressive legislation that has been passed over the last 60 years. And I'm happy that you all had mentioned Roe v. Wade. That is one of the main things. But within a month, the Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act will be up for debate to get rid of it completely. And that may cost 23 million people their health care. And they're a very important affirmative action case as well. Which is one of the last remedies against racism. And I'm not sure if you all saw the debate, but you could see the president could not bring himself to condemn white supremacy. In fact, he took an alternative point of view and told this neo-Nazi group to stand by. This is shameful, and I'm not sure there will be further debates.
Dr. Jennings, you talk about Roe v. Wade being such an important issue when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, as well to Obamacare, this whole issue around health care in the U.S. I think Biden summed it up quite well, and many people have said it in the past as well, that being a woman in the U.S., if the Affordable Care Act is repealed, being a woman in the U.S. will then become a pre-existing condition that is not covered.
Yes, because the kinds of illnesses that sometimes are gendered would not be covered anymore. And so Biden was trying to expand it beyond just Roe v. Wade, because not everyone agrees on the abortion question. Many people are very religious, and that their religion may cause them to have a different position, even though they may be progressive on many other issues. And because of one's faith, especially those who are Catholic, and many of the judges on the court are Catholic, this seems like something that will be immediately undone. And this is something that those on the right have been working at for since Roe was passed.
Dr. Jennings, at the start of our discussion, you mentioned that the response to the Supreme Court issue and Amy Coney Barrett was not unexpected from both candidates. Is that the sense you get on most of the big issues that were covered in this debate, that we didn't hear anything new? These were things Trump and Biden had both said on issues of COVID-19. On the tax issue, perhaps was one new response from Trump. He says he's paid millions in tax between 2016 and 2017. But very many of the issues, we have heard it all before.
Well, he didn't pay millions of dollars in taxes. They asked about individual income tax, and it's been proven that he only paid $750 in 2016 and in 2017. Much of this was shameful. We've never had a presidential debate like what we just witnessed. It was the most chaotic debate that has been recorded. In fact, that's why I'm just not sure that the Democratic candidate gains anything by debating him. Most of the news analysis over here is that this was a disaster, horrific. In fact, one of the most respected analysts said it was a shit show. And this is an embarrassment for civil discourse in the United States. From my vantage point, the president did not come to engage in that type of debate. He came to interrupt Biden. He came to perform. And no one knows what his policies are because the Republican Party did not adopt a platform at its recent convention. They just agree with whatever President Trump wants to do. So I'm not so sure what was accomplished here, if anything, except a refusal to play by the rules. That was consistent with his contempt for the constitutional order. But these debates have a long-standing history and role and tradition in how the American people decide on who they want their leaders to be and what policies they want to be adopted. But in this instance, I don't really think much was accomplished. But again, it was quite dangerous because his refusal to condemn neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and white supremacy in whole is not just a philosophical issue. There are militias who are already engaged in killing people in this country and planning to engage in politically motivated electoral violence during the election. And they are waiting for what they call the presidential signal. He certainly sent one tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Jennings, my final question to you before we go, perhaps one of the most worrying comments from President Donald Trump in the final moments of that debate, a question around whether he would endorse the election results. He says, well, he hopes it'll be fair.
Well, this is one of those questions that I think my experience of working on the African continent, most candidates that, especially the autocratic ones, will say, the only way I can lose is that it's rigged. That's what Donald Trump is saying. The only way he can lose is that it's rigged. Well, guess who's doing the rigging? by manipulating the U.S. Postal Service, that's slowing down delivery of mail, by constantly saying that the election will be fraudulent. I mean, it's fraudulent if he loses, but it's okay if he wins. This doesn't make sense. There isn't a history of fraud and mail-in ballots. The military has been doing it forever. In fact, there are about 6 or 7 countries, they only use mail-in ballots. 6 or 7 states, I'm sorry, that only use mail-in ballots. And in fact, the president votes via the mail. And so does many members of his cabinet. But this is a red herring that is allowing the president to manipulate this entire process. I am quite afraid of a constitutional crisis that we're going to be facing perhaps as early as November the 4th. This is not good for this country, and it's not good for the international community.
Dr. Jennings, I know you say that there was nothing presidential about this debate, but it is an important debate nonetheless. Now, talking about the issues that affect minorities, because obviously they are a factor in this election. I mean, when you look at issues like COVID-19 and how it affects them, but also the growing unemployment. And there was also the issue of the ban on racial sensitivity training in the United States. You would have had both candidates. Now, looking at the expectations of the minority groupings within the United States, who between the candidates do you think was more convincing? But also, more importantly, what are the key issues that the minorities in the United States would have been looking out for in this debate?
Well, there are a number of people who are supporting Biden reluctantly. Because they are concerned about his commitment to criminal justice reform, for instance. And so many people were looking for him to be strong on those issues. And in the back and forth, one could be confused because he was sometimes responding to what Trump was saying as opposed to laying out his policies, which most people have agreed with. The need for there to be police reform because of the excessive use of deadly force by the police in a number of high-profile cases over here. But many of the people, in fact, I would say most of the national minorities, African Americans, the majority of the Latinos, are going to vote for Biden because they are Democrats. However, Trump has made it clear that he wants to try to get a portion of the black vote, especially black male voters. I'm not. I mean, I've seen no evidence to show that he will. He was touting some prison reform. Only a few hundred people have benefited from that, and that's at the federal level when most of the people incarcerated are at the state level. For instance, here in Georgia, approximately 70% of the people incarcerated are African American men, and this is repeated across the South. So the real interest, I think, around health care, around the question of housing or education, many of the social and economic rights that are not fully being observed right now. The president has a Justice Department that should be moving to ensure African Americans and other national minorities can participate in the political process. As opposed to doing that, they're undermining it by saying that they don't think that the Attorney General, he doesn't think that there's a law that says you can't vote twice. This, I can't say it on your television show, but this is the most ridiculous thing for the chief law enforcement officer in the United States to say. He knows that it's a felony for someone to try to vote twice. And they have not used the apparatuses of the state to make sure that the rights, civil and political rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights of African Americans and others to be supported. So I don't want you to misunderstand me when I say that this was an embarrassment. There were important issues that came up, and people were looking for signals. But most people already know that Trump is running on a racist platform. He ran on a xenophobic platform in 2016, anti-immigrant. And when you look at the policies of separating children at the border, of calling their good people on both sides in the Charlottesville fiasco, and more recently, embracing young white vigilante who killed 2 people and wounded another and crossed state lines to commit a crime with a 17-year-old with an AR-15. These are the kinds of things that have caused people to already make up their minds. And quite frankly, I don't think a lot of people were surprised. People were hoping that there could be a civil debate so that you could get some sense of what the policy differences are. Perhaps Biden did score points there because he had many times talked directly in the camera to the American people. But I'm not sure that too many minds were changed with this debate.
Dr. Jennings, you say you're not sure whether too many minds were changed in this debate. I know there's still 2 more presidential debates to come, but also we know that in the United States, the issue of the so-called battleground states, those swing states, obviously the sentiments coming out of these debates, and also depending on how convincing the candidates are, they're able to sway those voters one way or the other. In this particular instance, I know you're not impressed with the outcome of this debate. In this particular instance, as things stand, where do you think, what do you think are those battlegrounds, and also where do you think the sentiments are coming out of this debate?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are about 5 or 6 battleground states. In the South, it would be North Carolina, Georgia, where I am. Florida would be more important because they have 29 electoral votes. And then in the Southwest, Arizona, and perhaps Nevada. And then in the Midwestern part of the country would be Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. These are states that will decide who will be the next president. And right now, Joe Biden is leading in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and it's a toss-up in Florida. Biden is even leading in North Carolina. So none of the polls would suggest that Trump will win. But because of 2016, many people are not fully confident that the polls really reflect what people think. And so the election possibly could be closer, or it could be a landslide for Biden. And that's why we are encouraging everyone to go out and vote, because the voter suppression is one way of achieving that is to convince people that they have nothing to vote for and that it doesn't matter. What we are saying to people is that you have to participate to the extent possible, because COVID-19 is real. And African Americans and Latinos constitute a large percentage of the people who have died over here and who have, out of the 7 million, who contracted it. And so I think that the determination that many people have to participate will not be shaken. The question is, if the president loses, will he go? And that, I think, is an open question.
Dr. Jennings, before we let you go, the issue of polls, I think Hillary Clinton might be getting flashbacks, as you mentioned, which way the polls are going. How much trust can we put in them?
I think the pollsters have learned a lot as well. And so there's some very credible polls that people look at, and sometimes they take the average of the polls to get a better sense. In the past, they have sometimes taken polls of voters in general. But one of the better approaches is to take polls of likely voters. These are people who vote on a regular basis. And I think the polls are pretty reflective of where the public attitude is right now. From my vantage point, most of the American people have made a decision that it's time for a change, that this president needs to go. The question is that Biden could win the popular vote as Hillary Clinton did. In fact, she won almost 3 million more votes than Donald Trump in 2016. But Trump won the Electoral College 304 to 227. You could have a split like that. That Biden overwhelmingly wins the popular vote, but because those battleground states are so close, and in this system with the Electoral College, it's a winner take all. So if you have a 50 to 48, or even a 50 to 49%, you still get all of those electoral votes. Some of the manipulations that the Republicans and the Trump administration are planning is to try to declare a victory on November the 3rd, the night of November the 3rd, and to try to get the electors to say that they're going to vote for Trump. And that's mainly because more Democrats are going to vote through mail-in ballots because of COVID-19 than Republicans. And so you could have an outcome on the evening of November the 3rd, that's one thing, but once the mail-in ballots come in, you could have another outcome that confirms a Biden victory. So it's not as complicated as it seems. The polls, I think, are indicating it's a snapshot, but it's also indicating a general trend. And Biden's lead is growing every day. And we're not that far away. In fact, we have in many states already started what we call early voting. So people are already voting. Election day has already started, in other words. And it will start here in Georgia on the 11th of October. Yeah. And I'll be one of the first people in line.
I'm sure you will be. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Joining us here in South Africa on Newsroom Channel 405, that's Dr. Keith Jennings. He's president of the African American Center on Global Politics.